Hello everyone, Calamity here, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be discussing the weapon banner that was released a few days ago alongside the Shenhe and Ayaka rerun banners. This is going to be a quick overview of the two 5-star weapons in the banner as well as the 4-star ones, and just a few recommendations on how to best utilize these weapons on whom. This is just supposed to be a quick guide to help those that are maybe not so familiar with the weapons on this banner. But before we start, I always like to remind newer players, I don't recommend pulling on a weapon banner at least until you have 2 solid teams, 8 characters at the very minimum that you feel like are very solid. Then maybe you can start going for 5-star weapons. But at the end of the day, I can't tell you exactly how to use your Primo Gems. It's up to you. If you feel like you want to go for some weapons, well then hey, let's talk about them. And let's see who they could be potentially good for outside of their signature user, of course. Oh, and there should be timestamps below for a particular weapon if you only care about, seeing a certain weapon on the banner. Let's get started. The first one is going to be probably easily the best weapon in the entire banner. It's going to be the Mistsplitter Reforged. This is a sword with a crit damage substat and a very high base attack. Now you might also see this really long weapon effect above my head here, but let's just kind of condense it down a bit. So first off, you're just going to gain a 12% elemental damage bonus. So this bonus is straight up, you don't have to do anything fancy, it's free damage, it's free real estate. Next up, there is something on this weapon called the Mistsplitter's Emblem, and it stacks up to 3 times. In order to get the maximum stacks, which is going to give you a whopping 28% damage, depending on who you give this on, most characters will easily be able to get at the very minimum 2 stacks, since it's very easy to fulfill the requirements. The first stack, you might need to do some certain teams, but it's okay if you're if you're still at the 2 stacks. You're still getting the 16% elemental damage plus the 12, which is still really nice. Now let's talk about what the requirements are for each stack. So the first one, you have to deal elemental damage with a normal attack. Now obviously this is super easy for Ayaka because she can self-infuse her own normal attacks with cryo every time she sprints. Other characters might need, a teammate that converts their normal attacks into a certain element type to take advantage of this stack. But again, it's not really necessary to do this, as you'll be able to do the other 2. The other 2 require you just to use your burst, and you'll get a stack for 10 seconds. And the third and final stack, you just have to have less than 100% energy. And this stack will be active until you reach full energy, or, i.e. you have your burst ready. So it's very easy to get the stacks. With that being said, this weapon is pretty much like the brother or the cousin of the Primordial Jade Cutter, which is another, very good 5-star sword that I've praised a lot on this channel before. This weapon is very similar in terms of utility, who can use it. Anybody, basically. Your main DPSs, your sub DPSs, even some supports. Bennett is a character that can fully take advantage of this weapon, even though it has crit damage, because again, the high base attack, he's sharing that via his burst. I'm pretty sure you could stick this on about any sword wielding character in the game right now, and they'll be fine with it. The only characters that I could think of that can't really take advantage of this weapon are characters like Layla or Chi-Chi, who are just purely support and just focus on healing your team or shielding them and not really scale with damage. Overall, this is a very strong weapon. If you get one of these and you already have one on your Ayaka, my recommendation is not to refine it. It might be tempting to, but there are it's just one of those weapons where so many characters can use it. It's better just to give it to somebody else than to refine it. Next up, we have the Calamity Queller, which is easily the, the lesser, valued 5-star weapon. It's still a pretty good one though, but let's talk about it first. So it has probably the highest base attack out of any 5-star weapon, not just pole arms, but I believe at level 90, this weapon has a base attack of 730 something, or something really high. Way higher than your average weapons, which tend to go around 500 or 600, like the Mistsplitter Reforged. Goes up to 600 something attack, base attack at level 90. It does have a substat of attack percentage, and it has a pretty simple weapon effect skill. Let's go over it. It's called Extinguishing Precept. So you'll first of all, you'll just gain a 12% all elemental damage bonus straight up passively, and then you'll obtain the consummation for 20 seconds after you use your elemental skill, causing your attack to increase by 3.2% per second with a maximum of 6 stacks. So that's about 19 point some percent attack. So when the character is not on the field, this attack increase is doubled, meaning that they will gain 6.4% increase per second instead of 3.2. And at 6 stacks, this gives you, well, let's just, instead of doing math here, let's just say it gives you a bunch of attack. So as you can see, this is a huge attack buffing weapon. It gives you just tons and tons of attack increase. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Shenhe's kit, she buffs cryo damage, but that buff is based off of her own attack. So that's why you have this weapon here that's designed to just give you as much of attack as possible. Now let's talk about other characters that can use this weapon. I would only give this weapon, outside of Shenhe, of course, to main DPSs. It is a, decent 5-star option for a lot of characters, although I would not give this to Hu Tao, because Hu Tao wants she wants HP instead, since she has a very low base attack. But characters that can use this and, wouldn't mind having it are, Raiden Shogun, Zhao. Zhanling, of course, is our free bingo card. Here's the thing about the weapon, because even though it is a solid option and it will give, whoever, the main DPS that's carrying this a lot of attack, you still got to build up those other stats because it provides nothing else. You still got to build your crit rate, your crit damage, your energy recharge, and depending on who you're using, elemental mastery could also be another stat you need. So you're gonna have to go much more harder on your artifact substats to compensate for what you're missing. So a better universal staff that I'm sure you've heard a lot about is something like the Staff of Homa, which gives you crit damage. Primordial Jade Cutter, or not Jade Cutter, excuse me, Primordial Jade Spear, another decent option for a ton of characters instead, because it gives you crit rate. So while this is a good weapon, it does make your artifact building a lot harder. So keep that in mind if you do get this and you decide to use it on someone that isn't Shenhe. It's time to go to the 4-star weapons. Now when we talk about these 4 stars, because they're featured quite often, I do kind of go through them fairly quickly, and they do tend to have short effects, like the Sacrificial Sword. So I'll just go over the weapon real quickly and then just give you a few character recommendations, and we'll move on. So first up is the Sacrificial Sword, which has an energy recharge substat. It has the composed weapon effect, so after you damage an opponent with your elemental skill, 40% chance to reset the cooldown, and you can do this once every 30 seconds. At Refinement 5, it is 80% chance to reset the cooldown. And I forget what the, once every, I believe, like 20 seconds or something like that, or maybe a little less. For character recommendations for the Sacrificial Sword, I'm sure many of you already know that this is a very popular option for Xingqiu, because Xingqiu has a very long cooldown on his elemental skill. It's about 18 seconds, so this allows you basically to use it twice in a row, and as long as you have a decent energy recharge on him, which this weapon also helps you get, you're basically guaranteeing yourself his burst being up every time you use his skill, or at least it should. Again, it is 80% at Refinement 5, so you are still going to have those rotations where the sword effect just doesn't proc, and you might end up being short a few particles of your burst. It does happen, and it's annoying when it does, but it's fairly consistent, of course, at 80%. Other characters that can use this weapon are Chi-Chi for more, heals. You can also give this to Traveler, either Electro or Dendro. It's a solid option for them there. Next up, we have the Bell, which is arguably the worst weapon on the banner, depending on how you want to look at it. But this weapon does have a substat of HP, and it has the Rebellious Guardian effect. When you take damage, you generate a shield, which will absorb that damage up to 20% of your max HP. The shield will last for 10 seconds or until broken and can only be triggered once every 45 seconds. While you're protected by the shield, you will gain 12% increased damage. Now, this is probably one of the most common 4-star weapons in the game. I've heard so many stories of, people having like multiple refinement 5 ranks of the bell. And unfortunately, it is just not a good weapon for anybody. I really can't recommend it, again, unless you don't have anybody else. Or sorry, unless you don't have anyone or any weapon to use it to use on a character, then maybe it's a filler weapon until then. But the only quick recommendations I can give you are Noelle very early on, pre C6, because the HP will help with her healing, and the shield will also help since she has a very long cooldown on her own shield, on her own elemental skill. So if her elemental skill is on cooldown, this is like a nice backup shield until the better skill is back up. You can use this on Dory because Dory scales with HP when it comes to healing. But with that being said, I do not recommend the bell on Noelle and Dory like later on once you get more options, because for Noelle's case, you can craft a weapon called the White Blind, and this gives you defense percent as a substat. And this is a much better option for Noelle, especially when it comes to getting her at C6. It'll give her a ton more damage, even for Arataki Ito as well. And then for Dory, I recommend a Sacrificial Greatsword instead, or a Favonius Greatsword, because those give her energy recharge and give her much more utility in the team than this. The weapons effect is also pretty useless here because, again, we have so many shielders in the game that we don't need it from a weapon, especially a weak shield like this one. When someone like Zhongli exists, we have Layla, we have Diona. We have so many shielders in the game already that, you don't really need one from a weapon effect. You'd rather have something much more useful. Next up, we have arguably the best 4-star weapon on this banner, and that is just pretty much because so many characters can take advantage of it. It is the Favonius Lance with an energy recharge substat. It has the Windfall weapon effect, where your crit hits have a 60% chance to generate a small amount of elemental particles, which will regenerate 6 energy for the character, and it can only occur once every 12 seconds. Now, at Refinement 5, which is possible to do, you can up this to 100% chance to basically guarantee those extra particles every time you crit. And that's something you want to keep in mind when using this weapon on any character, is that you do want to make sure you're getting crit rate, at least on your substats, or if you really want to make sure this weapon is proccing consistently, you definitely want to get a main stat crit rate circlet on the character using this. As for who can use this, obviously this is here because Mika is on the banner, and this is going to be his best weapon. But this can be used on just about any support that you want to have it on. You can use it on Zhongling, you can use it on Yun Jin, you can use it on your support Toma, you can use it on... this is actually going to be Shenhe's best 4-star option, believe it or not. So it's going to be a solid option for her. It's going to give her a bunch of energy recharge, so you can go ham on focusing on her attack stats. And since she is cryo, and you are going to be pairing her with other cryo units, you get that free cryo resonance, which provides crit rate, so she can proc this weapon fairly consistently without much investment. So if you are unable to get that Calamity Queller for your Shenhe, the Favonius Lance is just around the corner. Next up, we have Wine and Song, which is probably the second worst weapon, depending on, again, on how you want to look at it, but it provides you with an energy recharge substat. It is a catalyst weapon with the weapon effect ever changing, and let's go over it. Hitting an opponent with a normal attack will decrease your stamina consumption of sprint or your alternate sprint by 14% for 5 seconds. Additionally, using a sprint or alternate sprint ability increases your attack by 20% for 5 seconds. Now, I'm pretty sure, someone can correct me if I'm wrong here, but that attack increase is just for the wielder of this weapon. I don't think it's a team buff. I would have to double check, but I don't have this weapon. When it comes to characters that can use it, honestly, not a lot. The only one that comes to mind is maybe Mona, because of the energy recharge that can get converted into damage. But even then, Mona has so much better options. You wouldn't use this on someone like Barbara or Kokomi, because again, Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers gives them HP, which helps scale their healing better. and it gives them a much better weapon effect and gives them way more damage to your main DPS than a mere 20%, which I'm not even sure affects the whole team. I'm pretty sure it is just the wielder. So Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers gives it to your main DPS when you swap to them. It's a whopping 48% at Refinement 5, which is easy to obtain since it's a 3-star weapon. This weapon, however, again, I would just use this as a filler weapon for many of your supports or whatever until you have, you know, a better... There are plenty of better 4-star options when it comes to catalysts. And obviously, you know, until you get... If you're going for a 5-star, depending on what that is. Tons of better options there. So this just isn't overall a good weapon, and I can't really recommend it on too many characters. I mean, again, just maybe slap it on a support or on your Mona if you have one, until you get something better. Lastly, we have the Favonius Warbow, and this is going to be really quick because, well, the Favonius Warbow does the exact same thing as the Favonius Lance. It's just in a bow form. So it's for archer characters, and Diona is on the banner, so this is definitely why this weapon's here. It's a very solid weapon for Diona. It's probably her best weapon. Again, you're just going to slap this on your supports. So Amber is also another good option for this bow. It does fit her like lore-wise or thematically, whatever you want to call it. But Amber is generally used as a support, and this helps her also become a battery for her team. Kali is another excellent user for the Favonius Warbow. It gives her a bunch of energy recharge, and she's constantly going to be hitting stuff, so she should be proccing that weapons effect quite easily. And another good support is Faruzan. Once again, just gives more energy recharge for her and just provides her provides energy to her whole team. So very solid weapon for a lot of supports, depending if you have them or not. Just, you know, definitely want to keep this weapon even if you don't have anyone currently that can use it, as you'll definitely find one in the future. Either you're going to pull them eventually, the current ones that can use this weapon, or Hoyoverse is going to introduce some more archer support characters that can utilize this. It's just a universally good support weapon for your team. And with that being said, that is going to do it for this weapon banner. Unfortunately, it's just not a really good banner overall. Yes, the Mistsplitter Reforged is here, and it is going to be the best thing that you can get, but hopefully you guys are lucky on your pulls and you're able to get this sword in the minimum amount of pulls, because, you know, the 4 stars and the Calamity Queller, as I mentioned before, while the Calamity Queller is like a very strong attack stick, while the Calamity Queller is a strong weapon, you are going to also have to build up your artifacts much better as well than you would need to if you were, say, using a Staff of Homa. The 4 stars, again, while the Sacrificial Sword and the Favonius weapons are solid, the Bell and the Wine and Song are not, and have a very hard, you're going to have a very hard time finding like anyone that can use these, and unfortunately they're just a waste of your inventory space. Honestly, once you get better, there are better 4-star options to replace both the Bell and the Wine and Song. However, Sacrificial Sword and the Favonius weapons are still really good, so hopefully you get more of those and less of the other 2 I mentioned before. That being said, are you guys going to pull on the weapon banner? Let me know in the comments below. Good luck if you are. And that is going to be a wrap on this video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you in the next one.